Hello everyone. I'm going to make another video having to do with the trines. So that's sort of a follow-on from my the last video I uploaded concerning the trines as you would find them in the human design system, and using the gene keys language to help explain the modes, you could say, of these trines and how the lines speak to one another. But now it's sort of how I foreshadowed in the beginning of the last video about the trines. In the human design system, I showed a few pictures of the Decans of normal astrology, and how those trines sort of work with the three water signs, and how the three water signs are 120 degrees away from each other, and how the three water signs are in three expressions, either cardinal, fixed, or mutable, and so it goes with all four of the elements. And 3 times 4 equals the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, this is an interesting correlation between astrology that I've already been working with for about 15 years or so. And it was real fascinating for me when I started to look at human design system. I was like, wow, these hexagrams, as they're shown around the zodiac wheel, are sort of like the Decans that I've already been working with. And Deca means 10, which means 10 degrees of a sign. So you have the first 10 degrees of a sign, which is the first decan of a sign, the second 10 degrees of a sign, which is the second decan of a sign, and the third 10 degrees of a sign, which is the third decan of the sign. Now, this is a real fascinating thing that I've written a lot about on my website at Astrological.net, and modality is real fascinating because, and the Decans are really fascinating as well, which also helps explain and make modality much more clear when you start to look at the Decans in terms of the minor arcana of tarot. Because in my opinion, if you want to learn astrology, it's pretty much imperative that you learn tarot and Kabbalah alongside with it, because it just makes things a whole lot more clear as to how these archetypes and the seasonal progressions move, basically, and the expressions with individuals who are born within any of these Decans. Now, modality is going to tie into the trines, because that's what the modalities basically show. Now, modality is a very useful way of conceptualizing the 4 seasons of our year, each of which contain 3 distinct months, giving us the 12 delineated signs of the zodiac. Now, the three essential things to know right at the beginning, and I've talked about this in some of my podcasts, is that the beginning of our year begins with the winter solstice, which is also the first day of Capricorn, and which happens to be the first day of winter in the northern hemisphere. We then move counterclockwise into Aquarius and Pisces before the spring equinox, being the first day of Aries. Now, the first day of each season is the first day of the cardinal sign, the opener. And I think Santos Bonacci said that the cardinal came from a word that meant hinge, like a door hinge, meaning opening, like the opening of a season. The second point is that the seasons themselves always begin at the solstice or equinox, and they always end at the solstice or equinox. The third point is that the first month of a season after a solstice or equinox point is always cardinal. The second month is always fixed. The third month is always mutable. In other words, cardinal is the beginning of a process, fixed is the middle of a process, and mutable is the end of a process. Now, these 3 most really fundamental points of reference when studying astrology aren't dealt with very much, I've noticed, I mean, I'm sure a lot of astrologers out there are very, very, well aware of this. But just from the books I've read and the websites I've been to and there's a lot of great material on these websites and within these books. But I just don't see people dealing with basically the real fundamental stuff that can really help somebody when trying to understand the basic structure of how astrology works. And the problem, in my opinion, is that for too long, astrologers have taken for granted the idea that the signs of the zodiac relate directly to constellations in the belt of our ecliptic, and that stars arranged arbitrarily are, where we get our signs from and their symbols and their meanings. And over time, this has led to a gradual misunderstanding of the seasonal process as it's related to astrology. Now, the origin of the signs likely stemmed from understanding our movement through the seasons themselves, first and foremost. The ancients likely projected our seasonal cycles and the archetypes of those seasonal cycles onto the stars for navigation and certain astrotheological purposes, drawing constellations and naming them after the seasonal times they were in and creating stories. But over thousands of years, the stars themselves have slowly shifted. And this has led to some astrologers to conclude that, quote, all our signs are off, right? Now, this movement has evolved into what's called sidereal astrology, of which a few books have been written. And they claim that, again, all our signs are off by about 27 or so degrees, I think. So, for example, right now, we're not really in Aquarius, we're still in Capricorn, according to sidereal astrology. But the critical point that's missed here, in my opinion, I mean, it's not even my opinion, it's a fact. The critical point that's missed is that our signs are not off, the stars are off, okay? Our seasons still come and go like clockwork, and we still know exactly when the solstices and equinoxes of each year are bound to occur. Now, the winter solstice represents the shortest day of the year. We're in the northern hemisphere. The spring equinox, equinox meaning equal, both day and night are equal in length. The summer solstice is when we have the longest days and the shortest nights, and then the fall equinox again is when we have, again, equal, but we're tipping the scale, so to speak. And it's interesting that the fall equinox represents the first day of Libra, the scales. Now, there's a lot to all this, but I'm just going to be sticking with modality here for the moment. Many books and websites out there, even those using tropical, which is seasonal astrology, as I'm describing it here, they might talk about a sign or what its modality is, but they really rarely explain what modality actually means within the context of our year. What I just told you. The point being that anyone using tropical astrology needs to get out of a quote-unquote astrocentric idea of astrology and more into a season-centric understanding of what they're actually working with. Because the word astrology itself is a bit of a misnomer, because when people think of astrology, they think of stars, millions of light years away that are somehow sending you scorpionic energies or whatever, while ignoring the prime programming agent, which is the seasons and the sun, and our local solar environment, what's right under our noses, basically. But some basic keynotes to remember about the modalities are that we have, for cardinal, the cardinal is the beginning of a season or a process and represents idealism, freshness, of a breaking new ground, grappling with new energy, kinetic action, confidently bringing an element, quote, out of hibernation, optimistic and forward moving. The fixed modality represents the middle of a season or a process and represents fixity, centeredness, stillness, individuality, perspective, quote-unquote standalone, and is an archetype of the process itself, being neither at the beginning nor at the end of the season. It's right in the middle. And the fixed signs of astrology have always had an important have always been shown in iconography of Christian symbolism or other religious symbolism. They're shown in the Sphinx because we have the man, the lion, the eagle, and the bull being Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus. And these four cherubim, as they're sometimes called, have always been shown around Jesus. If he's pictured, within the center of a Vesica Pisces. Now, I've written a bit about this on my Neptune page, which I'll put a link down there too if you'd like to read it, which also gets into, the skull and crossbone symbology and the RX symbol and the Greek key rho symbol, and how that became a symbol for Christ, and how it's connected to Kabbalah and the Hebrew understandings of these archetypes. But moving forward, the third and last modality is the mutable signs, which represent the end of a season. And mutable signs represent grounding, preparing for great change. They're changeable, malleable, mutable. Mutable basically means malleable. Sensing the highly energetic cardinal, quote-unquote, twin on the other side of the solstice or equinox. The mutable individual is generally worldly, experienced, natural, and what they're doing is deeply grounding a particular element for hibernation, as it will not be expressed during the following season. Now, this is something to really contemplate, is that when you're looking at a mutable sign, the element of that sign, say it's Sagittarius, for example. Sagittarius is the last month of the fall season, and it's a fire sign. So what you could say it's doing is that it's deeply grounding the element of fire for hibernation during the winter, because there's no element of fire during the winter. During the winter, all we have is earth, air, and water. Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And then Aries, with a big bang, so to speak, brings fire out of hibernation. Now, none of this is to say, with the keynotes that I just gave you, none of this is to say that fixed individuals, anybody that has a fixed sign as their sun placement, that's not to say that they can't have the energetic thrust of cardinal individuals, or that cardinal individuals can't have the grounding of mutable individuals, or that mutable individuals can't have the sort of balanced perspective of fixed individuals. And that's not to say fixed individuals are always balanced people, but these are just keynotes to look at. But what these do explain is just overall consistency. And within the signs also exists a quote-unquote microcosm of these three modalities. And these are shown by the Decans, as discussed, as I sort of discuss on my minor arcana page on my website. As you can see, the Decans indicate sort of harmonic resonators between the different modalities and the elements. And these are the trines. Now, trines are represented by 120 degrees of arc, landing one in the same element, though expressed in a different modality within a season. As you can see in this image, the last 10 degrees of Aquarius, for example, which is an air sign, is also related to the last 10 degrees of the other two air signs, of Libra and Gemini. So in other words, the 7 of Swords, the 10 of Swords, and the 4 of Swords are resonators. And when you look at those 3 decans and those 3 air signs and how they're all 120 degrees away from one another, you can look at them and see the resonating relationship between them. And these relationships between the numbers 4, 7, 10 and 3, 6, 9 and 2, 5, 8 are going to be real important the further we move along here. So just to recap, 0 to 10 degrees of a sign represents the first decan of that sign, or the first card. 10 to 20 degrees of a sign represents the second decan or card of that sign. 20 to 30 degrees and 20 to 30 degrees of a sign represents the third decan or card of that sign. Say, for example, if we take a sun placement that's in 15 degrees Scorpio. This means that this individual is attuned to the second card of that sign, the second decan, being the 6 of Cups. Now, just as there are 3 modalities of cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs, being the beginning, middle, and end of the seasons, giving us the 3 expressions for each of the 4 elements. Now again, 3 modalities times 4 elements equals 12 signs. There are also cardinal, fixed, and mutable areas within those signs, which are the decans, the decanates, symbolized by the minor arcana of tarot. Now, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn rule decans 2, 3, and 4. The fixed signs of Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus rule decans 5, 6, and 7. And the mutable decans, the mutable signs of Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo rule the decans 8, 9, and 10. Now, as you can see, each season begins with 2 and ends with 10 when you're looking at the decans and the minor arcana. So each season follows this progression of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 before starting all over again in the next season. Now, this maps to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life schemata in a real interesting way. I might unlock a page where I discuss this, my Cross of the Elements page, where the first Sapphira on the Tree of Life, Keter, the crown, isn't factored into the zodiac. Keter is composed of the aces of tarot, which you could call the quote-unquote puritanical representatives of the elements themselves. But the 2 through 10 cycle shows the linear process from through all the Sephiroth from 2 to 10, from Hakma to Malkuth. And the 2 through 10 cycle also shows the linear processes of modality as we move through the seasons and through the signs. But the decans you could think of as modalities within the modalities. And these have a very specific resonance with one another. So you could say that the first card of a sign, 0 to 10 degrees, equals the cardinal area of that sign. So no matter if you're in a mutable sign, if you're in a fixed sign, you're going the first 10 degrees of the mutable and fixed signs are cardinal. So you could say you have a cardinal expression of Scorpio. Even though Scorpio is a fixed sign, it does have a cardinal expression which resonates with the cardinal water sign of Cancer. So the first 10 degrees of a sign represent the cardinal area of the sign. The second 10 to 20 degrees of a sign, the second card or decan of a sign, represents the fixed area, the central area of a sign. And the third card, 20 to 30 degrees of a sign, equals the mutable area of a sign. Now the cardinal area of the signs represent 258 trine system. The fixed area of the signs represent 369 trines, and the mutable area of the signs represents is shown by the 4, 7, 10 trine systems. So if we take that sun placement in Scorpio that I discussed in 15 degree Scorpio, which is indicated by the 6 of Cups deacon, this means that this individual is a quote-unquote double Scorpio, or double fixed Scorpio, which itself also has a resonance with the 2 other fixed areas of the 2 other water signs of Cancer and Pisces, with the 3 of Cups and the 9 of Cups deacons. So the 3, 6, and 9 of Cups are 120 degrees apart from one another. Now 120 times 3 equals the 360 degrees of the entire zodiac. And these 3 quote-unquote resonators are called trines in traditional astrology, and they bring a kind of harmony to planetary configurations within them, or rather bring a greater perspective in seeing up the fractal and down the fractal, so to speak, of a particular element. So if a person were born, for example, between 20 and 30 degrees of Scorpio, represented by the 7 of Cups deacon, we would call this mutable Scorpio, or the Pisces area of Scorpio, which has resonance with the 2 other mutable areas of the 2 other water signs of Cancer and Pisces, the 4 of Cups and the 10 of Cups deacons. If you take someone who was born in the last 10 degrees of Virgo, he or she would be a quote-unquote double Virgo, or double mutable Virgo, because you're in the mutable area of the mutable sign, which resonates with the mutable areas of the other 2 earth signs of Capricorn and Taurus, the 4 of discs and the 7 of discs, deacons. But if this person were born anywhere from 0 to 10 degrees of Virgo, the first 10 degrees of Virgo, they would be a cardinal Virgo, or a Capricorn of Virgo, resonating with the cardinal areas of the other 2 earth signs, the 2 of discs and the 5 of discs. Now this may seem difficult to understand if you're new to this subject, but it's actually really simple if you just stick with it and look at the relationship between these numbers. Now this is what I'm showing you here is a useful way of understanding the decanate numbers as arranged in 3 vertical quote-unquote resonator columns indicating the astrological trines, and 3 horizontal rows, the 3 horizontal rows showing the rulership of the signs themselves. And as you can see, like I said before, all the cardinal signs rule the 2, 3, 4 deacons. The fixed signs rule the 5, 6, 7 deacons, and the mutable signs rule the 8, 9, 10 deacons. But when you want to look at the vertical columns, you can see the trine relationships, in that the 2s of the deacons and the minor arcana in tarot are in a trine relationship with the 5 and the 8. So we have a 2-5-8 trine, which is the cardinal trine. Again, the first 10 degrees of a sign, no matter if it's cardinal, fixed, mutable, the first 10 degrees are going to be 2-5-8. And the fixed trines are 3, 6, 9, and the mutable trines are 4, 7, 10. So the 2-5-8's a resonating trine, and 3, 6, 9 and 4, 7, 10 have a resonating relationship as well. And from looking at how these numbers relate to one another, we can get a really good grasp on exactly how certain meanings and interpretations overlap in tarot and in astrology. There are numerical relations moving across from left to right, giving us the full quote-unquote reign, a sign's full reign, as it were. But then there are the resonating numbers moving from top to bottom, showing the modal relationships between the signs, being the trines. These are referred to as modality columns, or I call them modality columns or resonator columns throughout my website. For example, moving from left to right, the 2s, 3s, and 4s in tarot are all cardinal decans and possess cardinal attributes. They begin the seasons. But the cardinal prerogative, so to speak, is mirrored 120 degrees away in the other modalities as well, if we move from top to bottom in the 2, 5, 8 column. And of course you can see that the 2s are double cardinal, the 5 is cardinal of fixed, and the 8 is the cardinal of mutable. Hold on a second. And you'll notice that, for example, the 4s, 7s, and 10s, for example, if you want to look at the meanings of the Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and what these numbers basically mean numerologically, anybody that's into numerology, you'll notice that the 4, 7s, and 10s, either in tarot or numerology, the 4, 7, 10 column have many of the same general meanings, only expressed in different modes, right? Modalities. Now these are the mutable areas of the signs, the mutable decans. The fixed areas, those are the 3s, 6s, and 9s, also have many of the same general meanings, though again expressed in different ways. And so it goes for the 2, 5s, 8, 2, 5, 8s, and so on. So if someone is born, say for example in a 5 decan, whether it be the 5 of discs, the 5 of swords, the 5 of wands, or the 5 of cups, he or she will be harmonically aligned with the 2s and the 8s as well. And we can narrow this down even further by looking at which element the sun placement is actually in. This gives the individual his or her personal resonating trine to look at. Now this is especially useful for somebody that has a 5, is operating with a 5 decan in their birth chart with their sun placement, because the 5s in tarot are notoriously, can seem kind of negative. Say, for example, the individual sun placement is in the 5 of discs. It then follows that they will have a harmonic resonance with the 2 of discs and the 8 of discs as well. Now this is highly useful to be aware of and to contemplate the psychological sort of import of these 3 interrelated cards of one's personal trine. Just like how I talk about the trines and the lines of the hexagrams in my Gene Keys and Human Design video that I did the other day. These are sort of the same way in that you can see what the resonance, quote-unquote, frequency is in your life. And to see how the specific decan of your original sun placement, or any planet really, is mirrored, again, 120 degrees away in the other 2 modalities of the same element, and how one might harness those other expressions to bring greater harmony and awareness to your life, because the number 3 and the number 6 have a lot to do with harmony and community and communication and certain other things that I've dealt with in other areas, in other podcasts and videos, like the Trine video. And I'm going to be expanding on this idea much more in the future. But like I said, with the 5s, it's especially useful. If an individual feels that the minor arcana card representing a decan is too, quote-unquote, negative on the surface, like the 5 of discs, for example, which is entitled Worry. This card and decan does have many positive interpretations, but if one doesn't like it on the face value, they can look to its resonating trine for clarity. For example, they could look up the fractal to the 2 of discs, which is called harmonious change, the first 10 degrees of Capricorn, or they could look to the 8 of discs, the first 10 degrees of Virgo, which is called prudence. Now, harmonious change and prudence sort of give balance, great balance of perspective to the Five of Discs consciousness, which is called worry, but that's just a word. That's just a keynote. You know, there's more to it than just, you know, being a worry wart. You could say it has a lot to do with troubleshooting and being critical, which is something a lot of people who are born within a 5 deacon might be able to relate to. And I hope this picture will fit. It might be too big. But the numerical relations between the major arcana operate generally in the same way, with a graph similar to this one, with the modality columns and the resonator columns, as I call them. And there's interesting keynotes that you could look at. I think I'll go ahead and make this modality page. I'll go ahead and unlock it so that you can go there and actually read what I have there. Because this picture, I think if I tried to put this picture in a video, it would be really difficult to read. But it's basically the Deacon keynotes, to where you can look at each of the decanate numbers, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or the 9 or the 8, and how they relate to the tarot cards of the same number. You can see what certain keynotes with those numbers are, moving across and also moving up and down. Now, these Deacon keynotes are, of course, general. There's all kinds of people, obviously, but overall, the 7 words for each decanate number are accurate, delineating exactly to what degree a 6 individual is a harmonizer, or what degree a 9 individual might be elitist. Must be gathered from looking at everything else in this person's natal chart, to see what the other elements are up to, especially with the houses and one's rising sign. You know, for example, a 9 individual might be elitist, but there's both positive and negative sides to this, just as there are positive and negative sides to the quote-unquote intellect and generalizations of the 6. And I myself am a 6 individual. I was born in the 6 of Cups, Deacon of Scorpio, so I have a lot of the keynotes of the 6, which has to do with communication, simplification, the arts, the voice, generalization, harmony, intellect. You know, but a few people, you know, a few girlfriends I might have had, it might read that and be like, huh, harmony, huh, huh, you know. But it's the spirit of what the 6 is, what the 6 represents. It's a harmonizing number. Now, the double points of this graph are shown diagonally in the 2, 6, 10 deacons, which are also illustrated in the colored zodiac chart, which I showed at the beginning of the video. Now, these deacons are double cardinal, double fixed, and double mutable, respectively, and they represent the very beginning, the very middle, and the very end of the seasons. They might also be considered quote-unquote quintessential expressions of the modality they find themselves in, where the lesser mirrors the greater, so to speak. And these 2, 6, 10 quote-unquote double points are shown in the zodiac wheel as having the same color as their parent sign in this chart that I created, to help show visually the connections between them, the trine relationship between them. And, you know, this is just in case anyone was still wondering why some deacons are connected to their parent sign like that through having the same color. The reasoning behind this becomes apparent the more you look at the design. With the 2 is the very beginning, quote-unquote very cardinal, 6 is the very middle, very fixed, and 10 is the very end, very mutable, right? So this is actually really easy to understand the more you look at it. And it really helps if you actually have like a tarot deck. I mean, I represent, recommend the Thoth deck. The Thoth deck's actually a really good deck. Or the another good deck is the Hermetic tarot deck, which I'll put a link down there too. It's in black and white, but it's a really great deck in my opinion, because it shows the symbolism, but it also shows the astrological, archetypal sort of information as well within the cards. And moving along, you could say that pure trines are indicated by decans of the exact same color, though in different modalities. For example, the 4 of Wands, the 7 of Wands, and the 10 of Wands. Or the 3 of Cups, the 6 of Cups, and the 9 of Cups. And if one has planets occupying these decans, there is a harmonizing influence or a resonance, traditionally seen as auspicious. And you could say that loose trines are indicated by decans close to the same color, but not exactly. For example, if you have a planet in the 5 of discs, and also a planet in the 3 of discs. The harmony is still there, since it is of the same element, but it's not coming through the same trine or resonator column. And the relationship between these decanate numbers, as situated within the trine resonator columns, and on the wheel of the zodiac itself, it's found not only in astrology and Kabbalah, but also within the vortex-based mathematics and the discoveries of Marco Rodin and what he calls the quote-unquote mathematical fingerprint of God. And when I found this, when I started watching his videos that he has on YouTube, I was like, wow. And it's truly a fascinating correlation in that just as the Decans 258, 3, 6, 9, and 4, 7, 10, 10 being 1, have a very special relationship to one another astrologically, they also have an important function in the mathematical flow of energy within this template or symbol that Marco discovered. Now, this is a very large subject, but the math is actually really easy to understand once you see him demonstrated a few times, once you see Marco go through it and show you how it works. And there's many videos of Marco discussing how it works on YouTube. You could also watch the short documentary, The Cosmic 432, which draws upon some of Marco's work. Or you could check out the work of Randy Powell, who's continuing Marco's research in vortex-based mathematics. And there are many ways one could symbolically or mathematically explore this symbol. One way, actually, which is really interesting, is to see the number 9 at the top of the image as the head of a bird, and the 6, whereas the 6 and 3 are its 2 wings, you could say. In Crowley's Book of Lies, there's a poem entitled The Swan, which sort of encapsulates the dynamic of the 3-6-9 trine, both in the decanate trines and also as it's shown and discussed in Marco's fingerprint of God symbol. And Crowley's poem called The Swan goes like this. There is a swan whose name is ecstasy. It wingeth from the deserts of the north. It wingeth through the blue. It wingeth over the fields of rice. At its coming they push forth the green. In all the universe the swan alone is motionless. It seems to move, as the sun seems to move. Such is the weakness of our sight. O fool, criest thou? Amen. Motion is relative. There is nothing that is still. Against this swan I shot an arrow. The white breast poured forth blood. Men smote me. Then, perceiving that I was but a pure fool, they let me pass. Thus and not otherwise I came to the temple of the Grail. Now this is real. I just love that poem, and it sort of speaks to some of the ways I've heard Marco discuss the 369 numerical relations in his mathematical fingerprint of God design. But it also speaks to the 369 Decans of tarot, which are the fixed areas of the signs. And it's just really interesting symbolism that you could just contemplate. Just for me to like sit here and keep trying to explain it. Whoops, my video, my computer ran out of space and my video just cut me off. But I think I'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Actually, the modality page that I said I was going to make, that I was going to unlock for you to go and read and things, I think I'm going to keep it locked at the moment, just because there's a few things in there that I just want to, perfect, and make more lucid, you could say. I mean, it's really big and everything, but at the same time, there's other aspects in there that I want to have matriculate and maturate in a more, just to give it more time, to come to a better expression. But if if you would like to, join my website, you can get a hold of me, and I can give you the password, and you can just go look at everything I have there if you want to. I'm just a little sketchy about making everything so open so suddenly, because there's just a few small things that I've still been slowly working on and looking at and contemplating over the past however many years, that I just want to have displayed in the right way, So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.